Okay, it is 6:30, so I'm going to reconvene a meeting of the Oregon School District Board of Education. It is Monday, January 22nd, 2024, and we are in the OSD Innovation Center at Oregon High School. The board did convene at 5:15 for the Committee of the Whole, so now we will move into the regular board meeting. On our agenda tonight is one action item about open enrollment, and then the board will move into closed session after this meeting. So, on our consent calendar, we do have a staff retirement. It is Linda Schauer, who's retiring effective June 10th after 25 years of service to OSD, and she's currently a second grade teacher in Netherwood Knoll. So we do thank Linda for her service throughout the rest of this year, and then wish her well in her retirement after the end of this year. And then we do have the following donations, which I will read. $1,500 from the Oregon Brooklyn Lions Club for a Lions Scholarship, and then $2,500 from the Oregon PTO for a PTO donation for Prairie View Building Initiative. So we do thank those two organizations for their donations to the Oregon School District. So I will entertain a motion to approve the consent calendar. All right, Mary with the motion. Is there a second? All right, all those in favor, please say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
I do need to abstain from the 12/11 to 2023 minutes for the board and the executive session, just because I was not here for that.
All right, great. Thank you for that note. Katie will put that into the minutes for this meeting. All right, moving on to, did we go through? Yeah, we're approved 7-0 except for that extension. Okay, moving on to C, information items. First is public comment. Is there anyone here for public comment? Katie, did anyone register? Okay, one more time. Is there anyone here for public comment? Seeing none, we will move on to OEA report, and I do not see anyone here from the OEA, so we will move on to student report. And Peyton and Monacy are here tonight, so we will turn the microphone over to them for their report.
So last week was finals week, so this was the first day of our second semester, and almost everybody made it to their classes without any problems. The couple problems we did have were excellently handled by student services to ensure everybody had a full day's worth of schedule today. And students are able to change their schedule starting tomorrow if they submit the form signed by both their teachers and their parents. However, that was not an option today. Wrapping up finals last week, all of the first semester grades will be posted by Friday. Wrapping up that, and for seniors, then those grades will also be able to be sent off to any required colleges by our counselors in the following weeks. Student Council was able to hold and host a teddy bear toss and collect donations for the local children's hospital at the girls' basketball game the last week, and previous to that, a boys' basketball game. Upcoming will be the boys' hockey game, so you can look forward to seeing that. That'll be announced around the school and through the community. And we will have all of the captain's practices for all of our spring sports will be in full swing by next week, with many of them having had occurred throughout the last few months. Our last sports will be joining in captain's practices next week.
All right, thank you so much. All right, moving on to D, action items, which is approval of the 2024-2025 open enrollment spaces. So I will turn that over to Dr. Bergstrom.
Thank you very much. And while this is a collaborative effort, I would say that Gina is our leader in this area, I guess, with all of us here to support. So I'm going to pass the baton over to her.
Thank you. Yes, and I will echo that because I really want to thank Katie Heights and Laura Krebs for doing all the behind the scenes work to get everyone registered and give us the data that we need. We have a little bit more information in the purple tonight than in the past, and so that was new work for them, and I just greatly appreciate that. So just to let everyone know, open enrollment is very much mandated by state statute and DPI regulations. And so by state law, the board has to set the number of open enrolled seats by the end of January. So we are looking for an action item tonight. Once those seats are set, then in June, the board can add additional seats, but it cannot subtract. So historically, for that reason, we have been more conservative in January because we know we can always add more, but we can't take seats away. And so we start the purple with what we keep in mind when we make our recommendation as a team to the board. When we really look at our class sizes, K3, that is a guideline of 22 and 25 students in grades 4 through 12. And so obviously, when you get in the higher grades, it doesn't work exactly that way because it depends on the classes that kids are interested in and that they, is challenging to them. So math, science, things like that. So, and those are guidelines. We have been very successful the past few years. We've made a concerted effort since the pandemic, the height of the pandemic, I should say, to really keep our class sizes smaller because we knew the student needs have been increasing. And so we've been very fortunate to be able to do that. We also very much look at our needs in special ed programming. So that would be something like speech and language, occupational therapy, physical therapy, looking at our caseloads and the DPI recommendations on that. And so then we also look at our historical growth over time, looking at how many spaces do we assume that we will have in terms of growth, and really looking at how many students move in, but then how many students move out of our district as well. And then also, which is very typical of districts under our policy, is once students are accepted as an open enrolled student, they don't need to reapply. So once they're in, they're in. Unless they were to withdraw, then they do need to start a new application process over. So with that, I would invite you to all look at Table 1. This is our recommendation for the 24-25 school year. I do want to pause for a moment and just talk about special education. Because this, again, is a year that we feel we do not have space for kids that need special ed programming. We have increased our percentage of students that have needs in special education. I believe it was, 9% a few years ago, and now was 13% of our kids have been identified as needing some service in special education. So our numbers are increasing. And you have heard this from us before, but we also have more students identified that need special education in 4K. And so, we do try to meet kids' needs, and then they don't need special education programming anymore, but we have to make an assumption that at least some of those students will need special ed programming throughout their time with us. And so part of the way to address that is just looking at our resident students. That, just to foreshadow in staffing, I anticipate we will be asking for another teacher in our early childhood for special education because the needs are growing. So we feel really comfortable that we don't have space in special education, just looking at our resident students and those needs. And I want to talk about that a little bit because we did get a question from a board member ahead of time, which is a great question. What if students open enroll and at that time they don't have special education programming, but then later we find out that they do need that? DPI actually encourages us, and we have started to look at this, that the student would have to go back to their resident district. So if they start with us and then we identify that they have needs that we just don't have the capacity to meet, that DPI does tell us to send the student back to our resident district. And that is something, just given the capacity in our system right now, that we have looked at doing. And also, and not to say that any family does this, but we just feel that students who tell us they have special ed programming and they apply and they're denied, that we feel that if a student does apply and doesn't tell us that they need programming and they do, that we have to treat those two families the same just for sake of fairness. And sometimes that's just a matter because they maybe move here from Florida and we just don't get the records, and so we don't know until they're here. Yes, please.
I would just like to add that if a student has been with us for a long period of time and then needs are identified, they stay with us. We're really only talking about if needs are identified within the first semester or so.
Yes, thank you, because thank you for clarifying that. Yes, if we had a student who joined us in kindergarten and then in third grade had needs, we wouldn't send that student back to their resident district. So just keeping that in mind. So what we are recommending are the numbers in column E for the number of spaces available for open enrollment. So I have the asterisk with 4K because there's no, previous enrollment to roll up. So just in looking at our 4K numbers over time, as they've been pretty consistent. So we feel comfortable basing that open enrollment number on the number that we've had the last few years. And I know that 20 probably has your attention because we've been talking a lot about 4K. And so what I will say, what we try to do with open enrollment is that we try to use open enrollment to fill the empty seats in a section that we have. And so we do that delicate balance of not opening up so many spaces that we might need an extra section, right? So let's say right now there's 16 kids average in a classroom. And then with open enrollment, that would give us 19 kids in a classroom. And then with resident growth, we would get up to 20, 21, 22. That is very fiscally responsible because it helps us fill out that section with year one dollars. Because with open enrollment, our reimbursement rate for this year is almost $9,000. It may go up next year. So if you think about in year one to receive almost $9,000 for every open enrolled student, if you look at 20 children in 4K, that's $180,000 that we would receive next year if all of those students came. That more than pays for one section of 4K, plus pays for half of a teacher in another section. So, and if you look at table 2, you can see the number of students attending based on open enrollment the last 3 years has been pretty steady. And we do have 25 seniors right now who are open enrolled who are graduating. So if you think about those students rolling off, that letting similar number of students in helps us maintain our budget. If we were to pull those numbers back, we would potentially be looking at a budget deficit if we didn't have the growth to offset it. So that's the balance that we always try to do is how do we open enough seats to be fiscally responsible, but also be very sensitive to the impact on our teachers, knowing that our student needs are growing. And so we feel like this recommendation reaches that balance because you'll see if you look at 4K in kindergarten, we have higher numbers there, but then we really decrease greatly, just letting a few kids in per grade per year. And part of that is strategic because we don't want to be known as a district that doesn't allow open enrollment because we do want people to apply to our district to keep that fiscal responsibility. But we don't want to have so many kids attend that we then have to add sections based on open enrollment. And we haven't had to do that in the time that I've been here. So I feel like we've done a nice job of having that balance. And again, just looking at our class sizes the last few years, they have been smaller class sizes intentionally with our numbers of open enrolled students being steady. I'm just looking to make sure I answered all of the questions that I had from board members ahead of time, which is very helpful. I appreciate that. And then you'll just see on table 3, just looking back by grade. And this was really interesting to me to see how many kids after that, once we set the spaces, just looking at for growth, how many students move in a certain grade and how many students move out so that we can check that against our growth assumptions and just see how we've been historically. And now it's really exciting. We do have new developments throughout our district. And so we are anticipating some resident growth from those developments. And so time will tell with that. But I just thought it was interesting to see on various grades who tends to move in when, but then also, who tends to relocate. So with that, I will open it up for questions.
All right. First of all, thank you very much for providing the additional data. That was very helpful this year, so appreciate that. I think, Mary, you want to start with you? Well, let's ask clarifying questions before we put a motion on the floor. So first start with you, Mary.
Yeah, so I noticed for the 4K, only 6 are reserved for resident growth. Are we comfortable with only leaving 6?
Yes, and I'll tell you why, because I didn't know how to best represent this, so there may be a better way. But we, the past 3 or 4 years, have had about 226 kids total in 4K. So right now we have 226 children in 4K. So I feel like that growth is sort of built into that number. And so whereas the other numbers, we can get a better roll up sense, right? And so we feel really comfortable because even with that, they are smaller 4K sections overall with our partners. So we're not really leaving 6 for growth because that number has the growth built into it over time,
Sure.
if that makes sense.
Not accounting for like new
New,
growth. right?
correct.
Yeah. And then the numbers of sections, are those specific numbers of students per section, or does it change with grade level?
Yes, so for kindergarten to 3rd grade, we take the number of sections times 22 because that's the guideline. And then in 4th grade, you'll see we have more room because at that point, the board guideline jumps from 22 to 25. So if you think about if you have 22 kids in 3rd grade, you roll them up to 4th grade, that just gives you more room because now we could go to 25 students if we needed to.
All right, go ahead, Leslie.
So Gina, on the 4-year-old kindergarten, the 14 sections, is that including the extra section that Mariposa is being willing to add on to there?
Yes, it does include the section at Netherwood.
Okay. And then my other question with like that for the 4th, how you've got 10 spaces for open enrollment, but we were already at 15 sections. If we were to get that 10, do we choose where those students go to school at then?
We do. So we actually have to tell families where they are placed in order for them to make the decision if they want to attend or not.
Okay, that's what I wanted to find out. Thank you.
Yes, so that is nice because it gives us the flexibility to round out those class sizes with also knowing that families may choose not to attend if they get placed somewhere that's just far from their home.
All right, any other clarifying questions from the board? All right, hearing none, I'll entertain a motion.
I'll move to approve the 2024-2025 open enrollment spaces as presented in the purple.
All right, is there a second?
I'll second.
All right, is there any further discussion? Okay, hearing none. Katie, could you please call the roll?
Dr. Lakuta,
Yes.
Mr. Pankratz,
Yes.
Ms. Bijak,
Yes.
Dr. Bush,
Yes.
Ms. Garrison, Ms. Wright, Ms. Flanagan.
Yes, motion carries 7-0. Thank you, everyone, for your work on that, and we'll revisit this again this summer. Okay, moving on to E, discussion items. One is Committee of the Whole. As we've mentioned in previous meetings, we are not meeting as Policy and Vision anymore. We are meeting as Committee of the Whole, and so tonight was our second meeting, just looking at options associated with bus transportation. So again, all of these discussions are kind of rolling us forward to the staffing plan as well as the budget. And so we'll be bringing those forth to the community as the board discusses the budgets and the staffing for the upcoming year. Anything else you want to add about that, Dr. Bergstrom? Okay, then we're moving on to F, information items. First item is a report on WASB, which is the Wisconsin Association of School Boards, which was the convention last week in Milwaukee. And so a bunch of us went over there, as we do every year, to attend 2.5 days of sessions, breakout sessions and general sessions with speakers. So as we do as custom is we ask those that attend to maybe talk about two or three things that were top line items that they heard or saw or listened to at the convention and share those out with us for the benefit of the group. So we'll start with the board and then we'll go to the administration. So I'll start with you, Leslie, because you were also our delegate for the delegate assembly. So if you want to start with that and then move to your session recap.
Thank you. So for the delegate assembly, it ran so much more smoothly than last year, which was lovely. We were out on time. You know, that's the important things, right? Things to note, Resolution 2402, stipends for cooperating teachers, there was one amendment to it. To now it reads, the WASB supports creation of a stipend program, and the wording that was added was funded by the state. Was added, and that passed. And then, I'm not going to say, like, if I don't say which, that they didn't pass, they passed, since we went over these prior in the last meeting. And then the resolution 24-06 for seclusion and restraint, the wording that was added was the WASB supports continued best practice resources, training, and funding to support school districts reducing incidents of seclusion was added to that. And then that passed. Lots of passing, which is good. And then in the one that we had an amendment for, the 24-11 licensure under general policy, where we requested they keep in the word adequately compensated regarding teachers, that amendment failed, but the overall amendment passed without that wording added in there. Everything else passed. The resolution 2324R-004 from the Milwaukee Public Schools regarding the bilingual testing for ESL learners did not get 2/3 votes, so was not brought to the floor for discussion. So I imagine that will be coming up again next year, because that will become more of a pressing concern in the state with other districts as well. And that was the delegate convention. Like I said, it went so much quicker and smoother than last year, which was lovely. I didn't get to attend a ton of sessions because I was in class and going back and forth. I did listen to the one of the keynote speakers, John Quinones. I think I said that wrong, but whatever. He is a reporter for one of the news networks, I believe ABC, and he runs the show What Would You Do? Ran for 15 seasons, and I guess they're bringing it back up. And he's a very engaging speaker. I'm not going to try to or attempt to kind of explain all of the things, but I wanted to give you my thoughts or what I was thinking about afterwards. And he kind of talked about how he grew up poor, but he's like a 7th generation American from Mexico, but living in Texas, growing up living in Texas. And he talked about how growing up poor there, how that made a big difference in his life and how he strove for things. And I was thinking about this, and I was thinking about that being an underlying kind of current of like how experiences in our lives shape who we become and how we might act or react to situations. And then it made me think about, like, as school board members or parents or educators, that we're all involved in the lives of young children and somehow touching them in their lives somehow, and usually daily or weekly, right? And so with that, I thought we should really step back and take the time to reflect about what kind of experiences that we are giving them here at OSD, and that are we giving them the experiences that are going to lead them down to the path of making a positive difference in society, or are they ones that might cause them to question, am I good enough? Am I rich enough? Am I the right color? Am I the right gender? Or whatever, fill in the blank kind of thing. And then I obviously, and I think everyone here in this room, we hope that they leave OSD with the positive experiences. And I think we worked really hard on that for Portrait of Graduate and other initiatives as well. But I want us to really remember to focus on that, because we can't stop trying to make that a goal, is to help them have those positive experiences. So that was my kind of takeaway from him. And then the other one that I sat in is trauma-informed programming in schools. And it was done through Strive 365, which is a company who goes into schools and will help with that. And the way they do it is they have a coach that will come in and they will work with the kids to teach them mental health strategies that are transferable, which was a really big thing, is those strategies being transferable. Doesn't matter if it's today, in a week, or whenever. They have things that happen to them inside of school, outside of school, that might cause of mental stress, they can use those strategies, even if it's 20 years from now when they're an adult, they will have those strategies. And the two school districts, that actually spoke on this was St. Francis and then the Brown Deer school districts. And they both have had really, really positive results with this. They were making, in Brown Deer, one of their goals was making sure every child is connected to at least one adult in the school system so that they feel like they can go to that adult. And she's like, we're not quite there yet. We're getting there. They also have, Strive 365 also has a video game that kind of teaches the same kind of thing. It's called Brain Agents. They didn't really go into that in detail. They talked more about the coaching and mentoring program. And then some of the things that, the results that they were seeing after a little less than a year, I believe it was that 83% report that they were satisfied with the programming. 66 reported increased ability to calm down when upset. 63% had no hitting or fights in the last 3 months. 67% in grades 5 and 6, and 39% of grades 9, they talk with their family about their problems. And 72% talk with their friends about the problems. But I just thought it was really important, and yet another way we can look at it. I know we are doing the trauma-informed schools, and we've been making some great progress from what I understand from Shannon in getting everyone, the trainers up and running. But just another way to look at potential things to do, so.
All right, great, thank you. Caleb, you want to go next?
Sure. So this was my first meeting in my first year as a board member. And so I kind of was conscientious about trying to experience as much as I could. I think I went to more sessions for this conference than I do for professional conferences in my area of study as a college professor, which I don't know if that says something about my feelings for my discipline or, but I was quite conscientious about making sure I tried to experience as much as I could. Wednesday, one of the highlights of my Wednesday sessions was I saw a group of students and faculty and school leaders from the Platteville School District that were working on specifically on ways to make students feel welcome in schools where they often might not feel welcome. It was kind of under the the kind of broad blanket idea of being inclusionary as much as possible. And I specifically went to that session because I had noticed in the program that there were students that were presenting, and I always try to be I try to make a concerted effort when I see student presenters to be there for students, because it takes quite a lot, especially for students. I've taken college students to conferences to present, and it's a lot for a college student. I think it's even more for a high school student to present. And it was just a really interesting opportunity to see how the Platteville School District is dealing with some of the challenges around being kind of as inclusive in the broadest sense as they possibly can. And they had created, I think what they called, I think the name was, I got it in my notes, they called it something like, and it could be not quite right, but I jotted down what they call a diverse student alliance, which I think is, I've known similar ideas and similar organizations, but that was a much broader kind of catch-all category, being, the idea of diversity and all of its different meanings to try to make students feel welcome. And so that was one of the highlights of my day on Wednesday. On Thursday, I went to a session. I went to several sessions Thursday, but the one that I really highlighted and I wanted to just share a little bit about was one that had to do specifically with the use of artificial intelligence, and basically how to use artificial intelligence kind of in positive ways, because as we all know, it's kind of taken off in the last year and year or so. And I was just curious what other school districts were doing, and I wanted to see how they were utilizing artificial intelligence in the classroom specifically. I also thought I might be able to take something away from it for my own teaching. And it was kind of interesting because this semester, for the first time, we were asked by the university to include a policy statement in all of our syllabi about how we will or will not allow students to use artificial intelligence in our classes. One of the things that I thought was interesting is they said, at the session, they said you can ban it being the use of artificial intelligence, but they're still going to use it anyway, right? And which is quite true. So in my syllabus, I banned it with the idea that I know they're going to use it anyway. But the reason that I banned it was specifically because I think we don't really know how to use it quite right, the way that it should be used at this point in time. So that was my takeaway, with the recognition, right, that they're probably going to use it anyway. And then the last thing on, I think it was the last session I went to on Thursday, was for new school board members, because I'm a new school board member, and I was just curious to see what other school board members were experiencing. And one thing that I took away from it, and I thought I would share this with all of you, was we were told at the session that 48% of the WASBA membership is in their first term on their respective school boards, which I think really speaks to, well, I don't know, it speaks to a lot, but I think it says something about the need, and I think one of the things that we have going for us is that we have some continuity. We're not all in our first terms on school boards, but I was really struck by that 48% number, basically about half, right, of all the WASBA membership is in their first term on the board. So I took solace in the fact that I'm not alone, I guess, in trying to figure out what the heck I'm doing. But it was a really enjoyable 2.5 days, and I took a lot away from it.
Wow, 48%. Whew. It's a lot of learning that needs to occur. All right, Anna, you're up.
Well, I had the privilege of attending really great sessions on Thursday, and a couple that I'll highlight. I'm as the chair of the Professional Sustainability Task Force, I had the opportunity to attend sessions that focused on school climate and how do we recruit and attract. And I'll tell you what, it's a theme across the board. There were so many sessions talking about how do we retain and recruit high quality educators given all of the situations we're dealing with. And so it just felt so timely, and I felt so proud of our district on the work that we're doing in that realm. And I had an opportunity to learn from other school districts and best practices. And one of the things I learned that was interesting, I hadn't thought of, and it was a whole session about school perceptions and the surveys that we do, right? We do a survey with our kids, we do a survey of our staff, we do a survey of our educators. And so we've got these school perceptions data, and we're looking at that, and we're using it to help us understand where we hit the mark and where we don't hit the mark. But what was interesting is they talked about triangulating that data and taking the, overlapping the perception of your students with a similar question and the perception of your teachers and a similar question and the perception of your community. Where is their alignment? Where is their disalignment? How are we doing as a district on communicating this information if there's a disconnect on what a student perceives with what their family or parents perceive? So it's just really interesting to think about the overlap and dynamic of looking at all three sets of data almost together to see. And then, one of the comments was, if you score low in certain areas, in all three areas, maybe that's an opportunity to really gain some momentum by addressing that issue and kind of addressing it from the perspectives of all three of those stakeholders. And so it was really interesting to think about it in that way. I had kind of siloed it, and I'm not sure if we as a district have been looking at it that way. Just an interesting consideration to use that data in other ways. The other one that I really felt interested in, and it's really interesting about the 48% being first-year school board members, is that I went to several sessions that talked about what it means to be an effective school board and what we can do as school boards and what we can do to empower student data-driven decisions and student achievement and student experiences, right? We are here because of students. and we're here because of the kids in our community. And one of the two takeaways from it, one was talking about leading continuous improvement. We as a district expect continuous improvement from our educators, from our administrators, from our district. And we as a board should lead by holding ourselves to that same level. And so what can we do as a board to continue continuous improvement in the work that we do? So it's just interesting to think about that. There were in fact, it was a school perceptions survey that they've built for school boards. I don't know if that's the right tool. It more so made me reflect on what we as a board should be committing to of leading continuous improvement when we hold our district and the people that are here to that same expectation. So that was an interesting reflection. And then the last one is a session that talked about a research that's been done from a person named A.J. Crable, C-R-A-B-I-L-L. And a book that was written in 2023, March 2023 is the publication date. And it's called Great on Their Behalf. And it's, great on their behalf. Who are we talking about? We're talking about our students. It's great on their behalf. And it talked about a couple of things. One, that our job as a school district is to shift our adult mindset to fit what we need to do for our students to learn. And it's shifting our adult mindset. All students are capable of learning. It's how do we shift our mindset to get ourselves there. It's a very interesting concept. And also the challenge for school boards to really be student-centered and looking at data, reflecting on data, monitoring and progress, looking at data regularly to inform decisions on all of the things that we're doing. And I feel like we as a district are doing a good job of going in that direction. And I just felt it was very interesting to hear that that is an important part of what it means to be an effective school board. So those are my takeaways.
All right, thanks, Anna. Heather, you want to go next?
Well, I always start with the positive. So I just, overall, it's really great to go to this conference and hear, from different school districts, some of which are similar sized as we are, or, similar demographics, and some that aren't. But overall, I came away thinking, we are really well positioned. And I know our job is to kind of laser focus on, okay, we've got to do this and we've got to do this and we're not doing this and we're not doing enough of this and what's our strategy and how can we look down the road 5 years. But I also felt it was important to just, to take a breath and really remember how good things are. Not that we can't be better, not that we can't improve, but just, and what makes that happen is community support and amazing teachers and hardworking admins and wonderful staff. And so it wasn't by any means okay, we're good, let's not, think of other things that we can do to continue. But there was a moment of reflection of, a lot of things are going well, and that's a testament to boards before us and everybody who's worked so hard on that. And a couple of examples on that were when I sat in on some of these sessions, like the school perceptions. I had some of the similar things as Anna did with the triangulation, but we use school perception. So there were districts in there who weren't using it at all, and so that's again a testament to we're farther maybe down the path, still have a road to go, but it was encouraging to hear, when people were talking about best practices, that I could pick out. Another one was social media, what we're doing, what Erica, not we, no royal we, what Erica is doing, and it was encouraging to hear, yep, we're doing some of these things. Again, always can improve. After all of this positive, I'll say the negative is that the theme is special education and budget deficits. I heard that in almost every session, whether it was particularly focused on special education, but just due to the lack of state support, that was a common thing that we talked about in almost every session. And then my one so that was like my rose, my thorn, and now it's like the bud, how you grow, is the theme of data was just also everywhere. Maybe they're using AI, I don't know. But it really was about how schools are becoming so sophisticated in their data analysis and what a powerful tool that can be. And again, we're doing things along data, so it's not that, okay, what's data, what are we doing? It's just really the school districts who have really dug in on data are seeing some interesting takeaways and have the ability to make, better, more educated decisions.
Troy.
Great. So I tend to gravitate, or at least this year I tended to gravitate towards sessions focused on leadership and goal setting and progress monitoring. And I sat in on probably 3 or 4 sessions around those topics. And really, always emphasizing the importance of setting a few clear, achievable goals and making sure that we don't try to set too many goals that aren't going to get the attention. And then, one of the sessions really focused a lot in on this cadence of accountability and gave some best practices for school boards on how to establish that cadence of accountability and knowing that we meet a couple times a month maybe, and how can we be most effective as a school board to be monitoring the progress against those goals. So also visible scorecards. So when we do set those goals, making it very visible, and this really applies to school goals as well. There was some discussion on how schools make their goals very, very visible, make the progress they posted on the front wall, and how productive that can really be. And then just to build on Heather's point about data, it seems like everybody really is working on data. Different schools are at different parts of that path, but it does seem to be such a big challenge to effectively use and monitor student achievement data. And I would say I didn't really see anything that stood out as any school was doing it much better or different than we are. I think everybody's experiencing the same challenges that we're going through, and on how to pull all that data together and use it successfully. So still looking for more on that, but nothing stood out at the conference. And then I'll just close with saying how much I enjoyed learning together as a group with all of us there, with the board members and administrators, and really enjoyed the conversations after the sessions on the different takeaways that we had. I'll call out my fellow board member Heather. We debriefed after a couple of sessions. I think it was a good 3 or 4 sessions where I may have really enjoyed the speaker, really got a lot out of it, and Heather was like, "Oh my God, I couldn't wait till he was done talking," and then vice versa. And yeah, but it just reminded me the importance of different viewpoints and being able to openly talk about how we feel and what we've learnned as a group. So I couldn't help but share that, because there was a couple of different sessions where that came up. So
Great, thank you. All right, we want to move to administrators. John, since you're close to the microphone, do you want to start?
I brought handouts from one of them. So the handouts are from the one that I found most interesting, which I'll talk about in just a second. But there were 2 main ones that I enjoyed a lot of them. Some of them were mid, but that's what the kids are saying these days, right? Okay, they used to, whatever. I catch things later. Anyway, but they were last year's terms. Anyway, some of them were mid, but most of them were really good, and I got a lot out of the data ones. One district shared, it was called Celebrating Educator Impact, which I found it was really interesting. It was basically, they revamped their teacher recognition. Yeah, you were in this one, weren't you? Anyway, or no, somebody else was, but anyway, it was really cool because they took some of the things that they did in the past, which were sort of traditional teacher recognition things, and they really changed them into being some very much more like high-profile recognizing teachers in front of the community with students. And they also acknowledged that like some of them were big lifts that involved like their foundation, and others were really small. And so they kind of categorized it in micro strategies and macro strategies, which is nice because it gives us an easy entry point. So I took away a few things from that, which was good. And then the other one, which is with the handout that I gave you, was from Waukesha. These are just, the flyer I gave you is just their public flyer about their key performance indicators for data-driven continuous improvement. Troy was in this one also. And their presentation, actually their slide deck was kind of long and doesn't have all the information. I was going to make it for you, but I'm like, well, there was a lot that they talked about that wasn't actually in there. And so it would be like, what does this mean? But what was interesting about it was that it was called Leadership Around Continuous Improvement. So much like Troy, I kind of gravitated toward those. And so it really talked about data-driven decision-making, and they use a thing that I didn't know existed before. It's DPI's continuous improvement rubrics. And so they pointed to those, and I downloaded a couple of them while I was there, and I was like, wow, this is really helpful. And I can really see us using them in the process of our SAIL work. In fact, they use 100-day cycles, similar to what we're doing with SAIL. And they have these key performance indicators that are regularly communicated, and they have like dashboards on their website. So this is all public. And I've heard different approaches to like how valuable those like live dashboards are before, and all the effort it takes to go into them. So that's not really the point, is the dashboards, but it really was about a process to get clarity around their data, because I was really happy to hear that they struggled with exactly, or some of the very same issues that we have. And the deputy superintendent who was hired like 4 years ago as their data specialist, she said, well, I started asking some questions of Steve, the superintendent who was right there, and I thought they were really easy questions. And it turns out they were not easy questions, like let's calculate GPA. And she's like, you would not believe that there's current GPA, there's cumulative GPA. And I discovered that some schools were calculating GPA using an ad hoc and infinite campus. That was a very different way of calculating GPA from other places. So I was like, well, that sounds kind of familiar that we don't have multiple high schools like they do. But it was kind of encouraging to see that they had what looked like such a well put together thing. But they were nice enough to show where it came from, instead of one of these presentations which is like, this is fantastic, and if you buy this product, you too will be fantastic. This was like saying, yeah, it took like years of work to really get in and say, okay, when we say GPA, which one are we talking about, and which of the 14 places where it's calculated should we actually pull from? And so I was like, yeah, that sounds familiar, because over the past like 2 years, the administrative team has been working on saying, when we say student growth, what exactly does that mean? And there's lots of different interpretations. And so every year we think we've got it nailed, and then we come up with one little nuance like, oh, I included this. And we're like, okay, let's get back to it. So that was kind of good. But the changes that I kind of see from this is that, one, continuing to establish these clear data definitions and ideas for data formatting. They said, yeah, they spent tons of time working with programmers to make sure that like on all their graphs, that proficient was one color and not proficient was a different color, and just making sure those colors were the same across everything, and to create what she called clear lines of sight from the goal to the data, because they said in some cases it was like, well, here's this goal, well, we have the data, but there's no real way to look at it directly, and so just going through those procedures I think was really helpful. So I've taken away a few things that I think we can use now. So that's it.
I also just really enjoyed the fellowship after sessions with people. But one of the sessions that I attended that I enjoyed quite a bit was shifting practices in literacy. And it was a smaller district's sort of journey through researching what the best path was for their school to move forward with curricular choices. And one of the things that I took away from it was how validated I felt with Oregon's plan, and how we selected and carefully made decisions and really leveraged teacher voice and built teacher capacity prior to making any selections. Because while I think there are a lot of right ways to do things, I'm really proud of the way that we chose in Oregon for our K-5 ELA selection and really used the voice of our teachers and made sure that it was a sound voice that was rooted in the sciences of reading.
There were two sessions that really stood out to me. One you already heard about that Leslie attended that explored some different services for trauma. And some takeaways for me, I think it was just really reaffirming about some of the things that we're doing. One of the services from the Strive 365 was training mentors and having mentors come in and work with students. And we have that in place through the Be a Champion Mentor program with our collaboration with the Friends of the Oregon School District. Training for staff with trauma, which is something that we're working on. Social emotional learning curriculum, also something that we're working on. So it was exciting to see how other schools are using community partners to achieve those goals, but at the same time really reaffirming and kind of like, okay, we're doing a lot of those same things. And that was a similar theme in a mental health for student and staff session that I attended that really focused on the Gilbarter School District. Yes, that's it. Well, that was a fun game. I got your attention. Anyway, so again, they did a lot with exploring social emotional learning curriculum, regulation for mental health, community partners, and then trying to think about how to use data to measure your work, which is something we're also really working with our school counselors on this year as well. So again, really exciting to see how other school districts are exploring and trying to tackle some of the same things that we're working on and reaffirming about the progress that we're making.
So I'll just follow up with that kind of theme of listening to another district and what we're doing in comparison. I went to Pewaukee's presentation on their 4K program, and they sort of described an immersion type classroom where they would transfer kids from theme to theme throughout the district. And the goal was to, of course, build content knowledge for future learning. So they did a lot of they had one room that was space exploration and one that was a journey through time. Farm to Table was one. So they have kids, they have a center-based program though. So they have all of these programs that kids can move after 3 weeks. They go to another classroom and have the whole, experience. So it's play-based, and they are really learning the content that they'll see later on in science and history and that kind of thing. So that was an interesting program. I talked to Lindsay Engelhardt a little bit here. And of course, one of our challenges that we knew right away was for us to do anything like that is transportation, right? But also just acknowledging that each of our sites have their own flavor. And so it's not always going to be the same, but in general, they're doing those kind of things. So that's reaffirming for us. I also just wanted to mention some takeaways from John Quinones, and he did a nice job of sharing his history. But what was striking to me is when he said that he knew that he needed to learn to get rid of his accent in order to become acceptable in places. And I thought that was just a really sad statement of the way we are. And John did a task force 2 years ago and kind of looked at where we're at with our English learners and that kind of a thing, and really trying to get us to switch that perception so that we can value other people's languages and other people's heritage and all of that kind of stuff. And I think that's so critical. And for me, that was huge. Like, this poor guy has been here longer than any of us, and he's got to hide where he's from so that he can make it in our country, which I just think we need to see a positive perception on all of those things. So. Did I turn it off somehow?
I don't think so. Okay. I think you're good. Well, so I went to a number of sessions that have already been mentioned, so I'm not going to repeat them. But one that I haven't heard anyone talk about, and I don't think I saw any of you there, was with the Chippewa Falls School District, and it was called The Power of Community Conversations in Public Education. And it was all about this process that they do. So they found a way to get, and I think we did something like this a few years back prior to my arrival here at the district. But they got 150 people to dedicate 3 days to working and listening and getting feedback and working together to impact their strategic plan. So it was really interesting to hear about that. And I know that community engagement is one of our goals, and we have a bunch of stuff in the hopper right now. And that's not something that you do every year. That's something that you do every few years. But it was really interesting to hear how they did that and to hear that that's the way that a lot of communities are going.
Yeah, that's how we got our values, our 5 values with our apple. We had about 150. It's interesting to say 150 because I think that's what we had too when we did that. Leslie, I'll turn it over to you.
So not surprisingly, I love going to the legal update sessions. I cannot say enough about the attorneys at WASB, and I mean, it's tens of thousands of dollars of free legal advice from my lens, and so just love hearing them and learning from them, and just being, reaffirmed that we are legally compliant. As they go through cases, I sort of do a mental checklist, like, yes, I did that, we did that. But one thing that really stood out to me, and it's relevant for our meeting tonight, is one case that wasn't on my radar, which they spent a little bit of time on. It's just fascinating. The Office of Civil Rights has really given us really clear directives that we are to be vigilant in protecting our students' rights to be free from discrimination and harassment, and they are going to vigorously enforce that. And so there was a very intriguing case that came out of Georgia where the district was looking at potentially removing books from the library that arguably had inappropriate content for high school students. And as you can imagine, people came and commented at board meetings and had very strong feelings about that. And students filed a complaint, and in part in reliance on the comments that were made at the board meeting, that they were so hurtful, that they had created an environment where kids were afraid to go to school and didn't feel that they could access their education and didn't feel that they belonged. And the OCR, they did enter into a resolution agreement about how the district was going to take steps to remediate that and give support to students. And so to me, it was just really, talk about, how to balance all of these things of people's First Amendment rights to have different views and speak their piece at a board meeting, but then also be cognizant that students are listening and that our words as adults have extreme impact on our kids. And, I see both of you nodding, and, just that reminder to all of us that not just because it's legal that we have to do it, but just to be mindful as adults of that our kids are listening and they're reading social media and they're seeing how we handle conflict and what we say. And that, yet again, it's on the district to monitor that and be mindful of that and to take steps to support students when that happens. And so it was just another reminder to me, and also grateful in our district that overall I think we do a wonderful job of respecting different people's viewpoints and being professional, but just also knowing that there might be another legal obligation on us as a district to monitor that and just see when things come up as how are our kids doing and how can we support them.
Andy, you want to go?
You bet. Sometimes I end up moving toward sessions that are related to politics and money for some reason. Unfortunately, that's not always the most positive place to go these days. So then I found other places to go. I found some things related to sustainability, which we are absolutely a leader in some respects. To the degree that the people who were speaking weren't even talking about some of the things that we're kind of doing related to electrification in our district and those types of things, and found out actually one of the people couldn't talk about electrification because the people that pay her salary won't allow her to do that, which is kind of a huge component to getting to carbon neutral, which is a goal of the entire world at this point in time, to come off of fossil fuels. And so that's kind of sad, but I'll leave you with the most positive thing that I found, which was John turned me on to the Green Team from Evansville, which was a bunch of students that were doing some great things in Evansville related to energy conservation and sustainability. And I told them I would love to find a way to do something similar here in Oregon. in any way that we can support that. And they told me the secret to it, and it's this very easy strategy called provide pizza. So I intend to talk to Mr. Pleiner a little bit and see if we can figure out a way to provide pizza and maybe get some kids to work on sustainability here at Oregon High School.
So similar to all of you, I try to look at the sessions through the lens of what are our areas of growth, what are our goals, and what can I learn in order to be a better steward of those goals. So one of the many sessions that I attended and really got a lot out of was the one coming from a neighboring district that actually came from Sun Prairie on creating a culture of wellness and the steps that they took in order to ensure they had intentional focus on staff wellness overall. Because as they put it, it goes from the boardroom to the classroom to the living room. The idea that when we're modeling wellness strategies at each of these areas, it does get to our students, to our young people. So they had some very interesting things that they have done that I think could be next steps for exploration here. And some of them are probably not. So Andy, they're expensive, so don't worry. I'm not stating we should do them right away, but I learned a lot from the conversation. For example, they have developed an on-site wellness clinic, also a partnership with the city of Sun Prairie, and they have strategized around their insurance claims related data in order to be providers of preventative care. They've decreased the number of people attending or going to emergency rooms for care by ensuring that there was a clinic open specifically for their employees during these specific times. They've also now branched out into supporting behavioral/mental health within the clinic. And they have, now this isn't, they've been doing this for a few years, but they believe they have a return on investment of over $900,000. And the clinic itself was about $450,000 for their portion of it. So I think they've done some really important things with a lot of time and intention around staff wellness, and it definitely will be informing conversations, not just now, but in the future.
Thank you. Just a couple things for me. I'm trying to also talk about things that maybe people haven't mentioned, but one was the last general session where the speaker really talked about reading and literacy, and she happens to be the wife of a former alum of Oregon High School, so that was kind of neat. But just talking about, and so when I tend to listen to these sessions, I think like Dr. Bergstrom, you know, what are we doing here? What are we not doing? What could we maybe improve? But, you know, her big theme was if you get reading right, it makes everything else easier. And so asking, and how much a school district is really a center of a community and a community leader. And so a lot of what she talked about was, you know, families are not coming to us until maybe the 3-year-old screening or 4K, but how much we can help parents be confident in what they're doing. So when she was talking about learning, you may have a parent who maybe is not a very good reader, but they can still have conversations with their baby in terms of labeling, you know, there's the tree, there's the leaves, do you see the sun? Or just asking the baby questions, and the baby can babble and respond. But at any age and at any level, we can help this community and help parents help their kids. And just as a school district, are we continuing to ask ourselves what matters more than reading? And so then it makes me think of the things that we're doing with focus on ELA and curriculum, and every subject matter has a opportunity to help our kids learn to read or enjoy reading. And so I know, Dr. Bergstrom, that's a big thing with you in terms of reading, but just how elemental reading is. And then in terms of what it can help people do later in lives, you know, read so you can get a job. Read so you can understand your housing application, or so you can understand finances. And so, again, these things are really good reminders, but it also makes me proud of the experts we have in here in our midst that are really working through these programs. Then a couple other things. One was not being afraid to be vulnerable with your community about things that aren't going well. And so we talk a lot about the things that are going well or what we need to work on, but also bringing them into the conversation when things are not going well, and being strong enough to admit, hey, maybe we didn't do this right, or hey, maybe we need your help, and that what can grow from there. And so I would encourage us to sometimes be vulnerable with our families, with our kids, with our students. You know, the Superintendent's Council, I think you've done that really well in terms of, you know, talk with me about things that we need to improve. And so that's a really a strength of a really good school district, is being able to ask people, what can we do better? And then finally, with the task force that Gina and Anna are leading in terms of sustainability, one of the things I heard in the leadership session was how much physical health helps mental health. And so are we focusing on, with our students, we know that more than half of our students are involved in co-curricular activities, and a lot of those tend to be athletics, which can help mental health. So are we focusing with our kids and getting them physically active, which helps mental? Are we doing the same thing with our staff? Are we encouraging them to be physically healthy, which then tends to, a lot of studies show that it helps you be mentally healthy. So I just want to make sure that we're also kind of focusing on that aspect of their physical wellness. So again, I appreciate the district supporting all of us to do this activity. It's great every year, in between sessions and the sessions actually. So I really hope board members and staff really appreciate the opportunity to go there. It's because it's a treat, and we should be very proud, but it's always a learning opportunity because we can always learn and do better. So thanks everybody. Anything else that people would like to share about the conference? Okay. Moving on to information item 2, which is visioning and strategic planning, and then moving into teaching and learning in the superintendent's report. So over to Dr. Bergstrom.
Thank you. I really think that what we all just shared is a significant component of the visioning and strategic planning framework. It is how we are informing our thinking related to the decisions that need to be made throughout every level of this particular framework. And learning related to our priorities. And as I said earlier, how does our learning help us become better stewards of our priorities and our goals as a board, as an administrative team, as a system as a whole? And that goes for the goals also. So I know that we are all quite used to looking at every learning opportunity as a way to enhance our ability to meet these particular goals. And I'm going to go right into the superintendent's report, because what I want to point out with that is that as I walk through the superintendent's report, please think about it in relation to either what you learned or one of the things you learned at convention, and or one of our goals, because these things that we share every 2 weeks, they are celebrations, but they are also evidence of the fact that we continue to move forward on what we know is important to kids. For example, January is National Mentoring Month. You see a couple of RCI mentors here having some fun, eating some cookies actually. And there's a lot to celebrate related to the collaboration between Friends of Oregon School District and the school district itself. We pair students from 4th grade to 8th grade with a caring adult who then becomes that champion. And some of us are fortunate enough to even be able to move into the high school and continue. My mentee and I, we have spent time together since she was in 5th grade and she's now in high school. And it's a really important part of what I do. Right? It helps me stay connected, and it certainly is enjoyable. Mentors and mentees meet for an hour each week to engage in activities. It's not about doing homework. It's about creating a connection from one human being to another. So it's a game, it's a walk, it's whatever helps create that positive relationship that really overall helps a student with their well-being. We have 70 community members who volunteer their time each week to mentor a student in our district. So many thanks to all of those mentors and to Friends of Oregon School District for their work that helped make all this happen. 4K orientation. So we have orientation this week, and students are eligible to attend 4K if they're a resident of the Oregon School District or 4 years old by September 1st of 2024, are 5 years old and have not attended 4K already, and plan to attend kindergarten in the 25-26 school year. So free childcare is available for this week, Thursday the 25th at 6 p.m. You're supposed to contact Lindsay Englehart. There are several possibilities, either at her email address or her desk phone, which is 608-835-4065, for questions or to sign up for childcare. So that's a big event on Thursday night, and it's always fun and exciting because for many parents, it's their first opportunity to interact with the district. And this is another thing connected to sessions that we went to and the importance of becoming more data literate. We have our Forest Edge counselors who recently won a state level award from the Wisconsin School Counselor Association as a program of promise. And it's connected to some really great work related to attendance collection and attendance and small groups and the impact of them. And it's about, creating or meeting very stringent data expectations set forth by the Wisconsin School Counselor Association, because that is a part of best practice in that particular field. And to have 2 counselors from our school district represent the fact that this is a goal for all of our counselors. So this is an award for Shelby and Aubrey, but I'll also say that the promising practice is throughout the district. And then Prairie View, this is a fun one. Prairie View's library time. So kindergartners, as you can imagine, love their library time. I still remember my kindergarten librarian, Mrs. Glatz. Loved her very much. And I think our kindergartners are now quite infatuated with Ms. Timmons. And they're learning many things. For example, and these were things I did not know, a group of clams is called a bed. A group of flamingos is called a flamboyance. Who knew that? A group of leopards is called a leap. So most of all, they're learning what books can offer and to enjoy reading. So good for them. That's a really cool experience. And now we have at the library at Forest Edge, we have the Genre Book Bakery. I really did think they were cookies at first. So the Forest Edge librarian, Mariah Richards, recently took 3rd and 4th graders on a literary adventure with creative Genre Book Bakery at the library. The students visited tables which each held 8 to 10 chapter books that the library paraprofessional, Mrs. Sheffield, curated from the genres of mystery, adventure, fantasy, realistic fiction, humorous fiction, sports fiction, and historical fiction. They read the book summaries on the back cover or inside flap, and each chose one book they would like to read from the different genres. After each student chose a book, they drew a picture of the book, character, or event from the book on a cupcake cutout and filled their bakery boxes full of cupcakes of the books they were interested in reading. I can see that being a fun thing at home and finding every time they read one of these, maybe not a cupcake, probably not good for the health, but something else. And then we want to say congratulations to our Oregon School District Outstanding Young Person Awards for MLK Day, Outstanding Young Person Awardees for MLK. So this is pretty fantastic. The award is given by the Urban League of Greater Madison to students in grades 6 through 12 based on academic performance, engagement in the school community, and volunteer services outside of school. Award recipients were honored at a special breakfast earlier this month that our principals attended. So that was a pretty cool thing too. So for OHS, I won't read, no, I'll read off everybody's name because this is really cool. Jada Anderson, Rebecca Cooper, Sanaya Jackson, Layla Miles, Jada Opari Ado, Carter Pribanow, and Savannah Walker. At OMS, we had Haley Akali, Kamir Booker, Amelia Jacob, and Jordan Opari Ado. For RCI, we had Alejandro Fulsick and April Seekins. And in addition, Jada Opari Ado was awarded the Betty Franklin Hammond Scholarship to use at any post-secondary institution. So big congratulations to all of them and to their families, because their families also got to attend this breakfast with the awardees from throughout the area, and it really is a cool thing for everyone involved. Speaking of, this past weekend, our 8th grade band performed at the Wisconsin Concert Band Association convention at UW Whitewater. They were selected as one of 4 ensembles to perform, and they were the only middle school band selected to perform. It was wonderful, and the theater was filled and full of all kinds of adults there to support the students, and that part was just as beautiful to see. And one of the things Ms. Sider mentioned at the concert that I think was really important to note is that this particular 8th grade band started learning their band instrument online. So they started in 5th grade with online instruction, and then they gave an absolutely beautiful performance in front of a whole bunch of people in a very professional concert hall. So it's something I'm sure they'll remember for a very long time. Then we also have our Heritage Spanish read aloud. This is pretty neat. 8th grade Heritage Spanish students recently joined young Heritage learners at Prairie View and Forest Edge Elementary for a Spanish read aloud event. Our younger students loved interacting with middle school role models, so thanks to Ms. Lofgren and Ms. Hammis for organizing this impactful activity. So you can see the Hungry Hungry Caterpillar in Spanish. How much fun would it be if you were little and have a middle school person reading that to you? And then our Wisconsin FFA Foundation grant recipient. Congratulations to Joey Shuk, who was selected as the recipient of the Supervised Agricultural Experience Grant from the Wisconsin FFA Foundation. Joy will receive $1,000 to begin his own dairy herd. And he's one of 29 students in Wisconsin to get this award. So congratulations to Joey. That's really, really cool. Oh, I love this one too. Okay, so the OHS girls wrestling team is working hard to get ready to host the first girls duel meet in the OHS history. And it's against Kickapoo and Lafarge and Youth Initiative Predators. Not sure what, that must be a co-op, okay? As Coach Eckhart so eloquently stated, this event is not just a wrestling meet. It's a celebration of diversity, inclusion, and the expanding opportunities for female athletes in competitive sports. That is Friday night, this Friday, January 26th at 6:30 in the high school main gym. So this is a milestone, I think, for female athletes. And congratulations to Elliot Lesperance for he completed in the semifinals of the Bowles Young Artist Concerto competition earlier this month and is moving forward as a finalist. So he'll play with the Madison Symphony Orchestra in the final forte on March 6th at the Overture, and the performance will be broadcast on PBS. Don't we have students that just amaze the Sox office all the time? And then we have alumni who amaze the Sox office all the time. So this is the latest OSD podcast, and it was on these fabulous alumni that you see on the screen, talking about what life has been like since they have left us and gone on to other adventures, and how the things in the Portrait of a Graduate, things that they learned in school, are serving them now in their many pathways.
So cool to see. Also, I mean, I just love all the pictures. So I want to recognize Erica, who spends a lot of time going to the schools and capturing kids and teachers in action and takes wonderful photos. They are so cute and they're wonderful to see. And also, you know, Dr. Bergstrom spent all day with us on Friday in Milwaukee and then drove all the way to Whitewater for that concert. So I want to thank her for showing her support to our students, because you put in a lot of time and a lot of evenings and weekends. So thank you for doing that. And boy, our kids are doing amazing things. It's awesome. Okay. Moving on to G, closing future agenda. Our next meeting is in February 12th already. So we'll get out to you the agenda and if we have any action items at that meeting. And then we will move into checkout before we go into closed session. So anything for checkout? Mary, anything from you?
I do. Dr. Bergstrom has already spoken about the OMS middle school band and their performance. And unfortunately, my work schedule did not allow me to go to WASB last week, but I did. That afforded me the opportunity to go to listen to them practice on Thursday afternoon. And it was really marvelous to just sit there and watch the interactions between Ms. Seidel and the students and their excitement level. And they played very well while I was there in the room. It was very exciting. So, and the other thing that I wanted to add is that the auditions were blind auditions, and so they were selected as blind auditions as the only middle school band. Yeah, so thank you.
Thanks, Mary, for doing that and representing us there. We appreciate that. Okay, Heather, anything?
Yep. My son's under the weather, which is not at all relevant to the board, other than I just wanted to give a shout out to the Forest Edge School Health office. And even more so, in addition to that, was just the wonderful partnership that we have with Orchards, because immediately, we already on site, the nurse was able to give him a flu and COVID test, and then, connected us. And I think while I'm here, they dropped off the things, and just what a wonderful partnership that is, not only for us, but for them, and also to all the local businesses that hopefully get involved with all of the gift cards. The rule in our house is that the one who's sick gets to pick the gift card, which I don't know. So far, they have not pretended to be sick to get the Orchard study, but now that I'm thinking that back in my head, might have another strategy. But yeah, just really wonderful program, and just a testament to how the community and we partner with them. So that's it.
Thanks. Troy, anything? Leslie? Caleb?
I do actually have something that I remembered, and I wanted to just share really quickly from the WASB conference. I'm a big reader. I'm always reading, and I actually there was a bookstore at the conference, and I got a couple ideas for books to read, which I thought was great. But related to that, and also because as we were talking about earlier how important reading is, and I might be sharing things that some of you already know, but one of the things I think this is amazing about AI as a tool, and something that we can think about ways to use creatively as far as helping students become better readers. One of the things that happened at the session that I was at was they demonstrated how you can use AI to take, and they literally did while we were there, they went on a website and found an article about an athlete that was written at a certain level, and they said, say you're a third grade reading teacher, and you want to have your students read this article because they're really interested in, I forget who the athlete was, Dak Prescott or somebody. I think it was Dak Prescott. And they said, say you want to have your student read this article, but it's a little too elevated for them. You can use artificial intelligence to change the reading level of the article to a third grader's reading level. And they literally did it while we were sitting there watching. And I was just kind of like struck by how cool that is. And then one of the other things that they talked about how they can use AI is the school district that was presenting talked about how they had just had a Vietnamese family move into their district, and the students there were 3 students that were in their school district. They were not English speakers, and so they were basically, in addition to trying to be second graders and fourth graders and whatever grades they were also trying to learn English, and they have no one in the district who speaks Vietnamese. But they could use AI to, they could put reading assignments into an AI program that converted that English language document into Vietnamese for the students. And I was just sitting there thinking about how amazing all this stuff is. It's a little scary, right? But it's also really amazing how much potential there is to encourage everybody and all of our students and all of us to be avid readers, and how important it is. Because it's something, I'm not in school anymore, but I still really like to read. So I thought I would share that.
Great, thank you. Interesting. Anna.
Just one quick thing. I happened to get a message. I still communicate with our exchange students that we hosted, and our German daughter Saskia messaged me over the weekend and said, "You can see us on TV." And I said, "What?" And so I looked, and 2 stories have been produced by Oregon Life, the reporter about the German exchange program. And so there's a part 1, and then there's a part 2. And he said, this was just such an incredible story. I'm making a part 3. So another one's coming. But so part 1 and 2 are out there. You might see a couple of familiar faces in I think the second episode. But watching that video brought tears to my eyes. I was like, I miss these kids so much. It was such a great experience. And so anyway, it was just kind of interesting, and she's really excited about it. So if you have time or a minute, check it out. It's really cool. It talks about the German exchange program between Oregon and Langen, Germany.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay. It is 7:52. We're going to take about a 5-minute recess, and then we will reconvene in closed session. Thank you.